Hey, I'm Sam. This is week 8 of the horror show. And this week I'm doing Land of the Dead. We are gonna have 2 more after this one, and then it's gonna be a new thing. Land of the Dead is... I would say this is kind of where it... Not that it, like, really falls off, but in a sense, kinda... I mean, it doesn't really bring the same kind of aura that, like, Dawn or Day bring. But, you know, it's still a pretty solid, pretty good zombie movie. George Romero directs it. I'd say probably the biggest thing about it that would be, like, a negative in a sense is probably just that when Day came out, that was in 85. And it's, like, 20 years later, and then there's this new one. And it's, like, that's a long time to, like, take a break from making zombie movies. Or, I'm pretty sure he didn't make any zombie movies in between there. But, anyway. Simon Baker plays Riley. John Leguizamo plays Cholo. Asia Argento plays Slack. Dennis Hopper plays Kaufman. And Eugene Clark plays Big Daddy. Well, we'll get to that later. There's a lot of cameos in this movie. Jonathan Walker, I'm pretty sure he's a cameo. There's only like one scene that I'm like, oh yeah, there he is. It's a pretty good scene. But he's in a lot of stuff, but he's in the 2011 The Thing. He was the radio man in that movie. It's pretty cool. When I saw this for the first time, I was like, oh look, there he is. Tom Savini, Greg Nicotero, Simon Pegg, Edgar Wright. Tom Savini, Greg Nicotero, like a lot of special effects, makeup. And Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright are related to those that trilogy that Edgar Wright did. Edgar Wright did the Ice Cream trilogy, and one of the movies was Shaun of the Dead, in which Simon Pegg plays Shaun. And it's just a little spoof of Dawn, but then again, it's more just a spoof on zombies anyway. But it's a fun movie. And it's not necessarily a spoof, but, you know, it's a fun movie. I like it. The idea of this movie is that the living dead have taken over the world, and the last humans live in a walled city to protect themselves as they come to grips with the situation. IMDb had this movie a 6.2 out of 10. Mine is just slightly better. Numbers don't necessarily mean much, to be honest, right now, because I'm kind of just up in the air about this whole rating system, but it does still mean something. It's just, you know, how much does it mean it? The story's a 7 out of 10 for me. I like it, but as I've kind of gone about, Dawn and Day were a lot more interesting in the whole, you know, what's the point of the movie? Is it just a story? Is it more than a story? What are you talking about? Is it a good thing to talk about? Is it a bad thing to talk about? I would say it's a good thing, but it just, as I said, it doesn't really hit how Dawn and Day hit. Although there's a lot of things I do like about the movie, that being, so it's a city, right? Everyone lives in the city, and the streets are clear, like no one walking the streets, only like the main characters are walking on it, but it just seems that like people don't even really go outside much, even though they can. And inside, it's like, it looks like nothing's changed, like no zombie apocalypse happened. That, you know, this looks like how our main characters in Dawn of the Dead probably would have looked, you know, a year or two into the whole living in the mall. I think the thing that's really interesting about this is how degenerate people are and how similar it is still to even now. That being how there's the first class, not necessarily just first class, it's, you know, the wealthy. And then there's the poor, and it's just those two. And both are degenerate to a degree, but the poor, you know, you more feel bad for the poor people, especially for the ones who do fight to, like, you know, make money, and then it doesn't really seem like it, you know, matters much. So that's where it's like you feel bad for them. So like the humanities, I'm skipping a bit. The humanities is a 7 out of 10, only really because of that. To me, I didn't really like. It's like you could feel bad for like the characters, but like when I'm looking at the humanity, I'm looking at the main girl on Day, and when she has to do what she does to save her boyfriend, Sarah, what she does in that movie, that's a bit traumatizing. So how is she gonna move on with that? Do you feel bad for her going through something like that? And it's just you feel bad for her, but you also, it's like you're a bit of relating in a sense with her. In this movie, it's like kinda, but like not really, or at the very least, it doesn't hit the same way, at least in my opinion anyway. The moral's a 7 out of 10. It's a zombie movie. They're dead, Although then again, it's like the rich people aren't really great. There's a few funny moments I'll get to it later. But this one was funny. It was like a really like messed up moment, but it was just came out of nowhere, kind of funny. But yeah, it's just a zombie movie, and then people are people. The music is a 6 out of 10. I don't really remember music in this movie, but then again, it's like I'm sure there's something like this. It's good. It's good stuff in there. It's just I'm not listening. I'm comparing this movie a lot to Dawn and Day. I'm sorry. It's not like those were like great. Those were great movies. And so this is like the next one. It's like, kind of fell off a bit. The music kind of fell off. I think there's a couple of moments where the music's pretty good, but I think it's only really because of the scene that's happening. That's why like the scene's really good. Because you could have a scene that's really good, but the music would like change how it feels. Like if you're watching the first movie in the Hobbit trilogy, and you're nearing the end, and there's the whole there's Thorin, and then there's Azog, and they're about to face off, and the music's pretty epic and whatnot. But like you just put like a romantic song in there as they're like facing off, it totally kills that that vibe, or at the very least it changes the crap out of like that vibe, and it's like, oh my gosh. But this movie is, the music is not like that. It's just, I don't think it's really impactful as like the other ones were. Cheese is a 2 out of 10. There are some funny moments. There's one near the end of the movie, which I'll get to the ending here soon because I gotta talk about the movie a bit. There's the main rich guy. He's packing up his bags and he's gotta leave because, crap's about to hit the fan. And there's another rich guy that's with him, and they both get off the elevator or about to get on an elevator. I forget exactly. But the main rich guy is like, oh, watch out, look, oh, watch out, just shoots him in the back of the head, like, dude. And then his butler, sees it around the corner, and like, oh. But he kind of has to stay with him, right? Not that I have to, but he does. Gold's 7 out of 10. I think there's a lot of great moments in this movie because there's kind of like two storylines going on. There's the people storyline, and then there's the zombie storylines, and they end up kind of weaving through each other throughout. But like at the end of the movie, that's when they like really cross paths. And then the ending's an 8 out of 10. So, how the movie goes about, the movie starts off with the main group of characters, although Asia's not really in the movie yet. She's more in like the middle of the movie. Riley and Cholo are basically like the head of like the I don't remember what they necessarily call it. They're like basically like scavenger team, like looting team, and they this is supposed to be the last day, and it ends up going kind of bad for someone. Someone gets bitten, ends up killing himself. And it's like, this is pretty sad, and it's like Riley's more sad about it, and it's more Cholo's fault. But Cholo doesn't really care much because he he's about to go and live the fancy life, or at least so he thinks. He ends up finding out that Kaufman's the main rich guy, was kind of just using him and not really like, oh, well, you know, you can't just like live here now, even though you can afford it. He's kind of just stringing him along and ends up kind of being like, oh, well, you know, I don't need you anymore. So Cholo gets his guys and they basically break out. They take the main like vehicle that's used for the looting, and they basically steal it, and it has a bunch of like firepower and rockets on it, and with fireworks too. And Kaufman then gets Riley, and he's like, alright, so Riley and Cholo kind of split up because of what happened in the beginning. Kaufman's like, Riley, I need you to go get this, you know, before midnight, or else something bad might happen, or whatever. So Riley is sent out to go find Cholo, although he goes out, you know, to kind of just be like, let's get out of here, too. It was kind of funny. So that's kind of when Slack comes in, Asia Argento's character. She joins Riley to find Cholo. And while all that's going on, there's a horde of zombies that's starting to go towards the city, being led by Big Daddy, who is very evolved as a zombie and understands a lot of things. And he's leading them to the promised land, right? And by the time Riley finds Cholo, that's when the zombies break into the city. That's when all the chaos starts happening. So Riley and them go back to the city, except for Cholo. Cholo decides to not go back, although he ends up actually going back because he gets bit. Kind of sucks for him. But Riley and the ones that join him go back to the city to try to save the people. Cholo, as I said, gets bit, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna be dead here soon. Let's just go. I'm gonna go back to the city, and I'm gonna, you know, take out Kaufman or whatever. That's basically what happens. They're able to save some people. Cholo takes out Kaufman, although it's more of Big Daddy taking out Kaufman, because Big Daddy is about to get Kaufman, and then he leaves, and then that's when Cholo's there to kind of stall. Because Cholo, by the time he gets to Kaufman, is a zombie, which I thought was pretty interesting, pretty cool. It's like, you don't know how long it's going to take him. By the time he finally gets to him, he's a zombie, which is like, huh. And then Big Daddy brings, like, this, like, Molotov grenade or whatever. And there's a bunch of oil, and basically burns him up. And that's how Big Daddy defeats the big bad guy. Although I think that whole thing is more towards the reason why Eugene Clark is playing Big Daddy, which I'll get to in a moment. And yeah, Riley and everyone that survived the night, effectively, basically leave the city, and they're going, not necessarily their own different ways, but they're just leaving the city, and the dead are making the city their home. So it's like, I found that kind of interesting. It's like they basically just switched places. But anyway. So there's only like two things about the movie I really want to talk about. And the one is about why Eugene Clark plays Big Daddy. See, if I'm not mistaken, the whole thing was that George Romero wanted Eugene Clark to play either Riley or Cholo or a main character like that, or one of those two. But the studio was like, oh, we're afraid of doing that because he's they were afraid of doing it because he's black. And they're like, oh, we're blah, 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 blah. And it's like 2005. It's like, really? Okay. Anyway, so to kind of like stick it to the studio, he basically had Eugene Clark play the main zombie. I'm not sure if Big Daddy was a character that was already in there and it just needed to find the right host, or if that was just a character that George created to be like, hey, that actually could be really interesting. either way, I think that really turned out great, I thought. And I really like kind of how you see, now we're going to go into the evolution of zombies, which is the next thing I wanted to do. See, when the guys are looting and stuff, they have fireworks and they launch in the air, and that's supposed to distract the zombies. But the only zombie that's really not distracted by it is Big Daddy, who's trying to like get the other zombies to not stare at the lights. And then in the beginning of the movie, whenever you see them killing the zombies and he's there and sees it, he's really sad, like, you know, he's losing his friends kind of thing. And it's like, it really humanizes him, in which I think is kind of the point of the evolution of zombies. It's because they're us. And so the more they, I guess, start understanding or start, you know, acting like humans, the more they actually kind of are humans. But they're still dead and they're still eating people. But it's just, I think that would be kind of the natural evolution. It's just you start getting to a point where, like, you are human, but you're also dead. So, you know, or something along those lines. It's like, in a zombie movie, when someone comes back, they only really have one prime focus, and that's really just because of how they're seeing it. And that's because of their brain. The brain's basically telling them, eat food, eat them, they're alive, eat them. But it seems that the more a zombie is about, and the longer it lives, the more access it has to the mind. So Big Daddy must have been one of the first zombies, I think. Or at least that's my theory anyway. And that's why he's so, like, smart, because this is supposed to be, like, I don't even know when it's supposed to take place. You know, maybe it takes place in 2005. It feels like it. I don't know storyline-wise if it's supposed to take place a year or a couple of years or 5 years after. I don't know. It does get a bit confusing because night to day feels a lot more like, okay, that could take place, you know, within the first year. Not even, it could have been just the first, like, 6 months of the zombie apocalypse. But then Land of the Dead just has a totally different feel to it. So it's really hard to be like, when does that take place? I suppose it doesn't really help when it comes out 20 years later. Anyway, I ultimately have this movie. I kind of skipped this part. I ended up having this movie as a 6.3, so it's just barely better than what IMDb thought, which was like a little over 100,000 votes and such. So yeah, I mean, I like it. It's a good movie, but it's like if I wanted to put on a George Romero zombie movie, this isn't the last option, but it's not the first, you know. So I'm Sam. This was week 8 of the horror show, and it was Land of the Dead. Really interesting movie, and it had a lot of nice moments, but it's just, you know, it's when you start comparing it to something great like Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead, that's when you start going and like, oh, well, you know, it's not that good. If you're comparing it to just some random zombie movie, I'm sure it'd be like, it's really good, it's great, but it's like Dawn and Day are just really special, you know. Yeah. So, yeah, next week is Diary, which is supposed to be a kind of a reboot of a sense. It's a more modern take of, like, if the zombie apocalypse happens now instead of in the 60s, or I guess 70s. And I guess just to be a little clear, I have, there's a video idea that I was about to do. I watched the movie, I was gonna do it. That's the next movie for RMR. I haven't really gotten around to it. And then there's the storytime video that I technically filmed it, but I didn't really like it. I want to refilm it. And I think I'll probably film both of them either today or tomorrow, which is, you know, either while you're watching this or before you're watching this. And they should be able to come out sometime during this week. I'm not sure when I'll have them posted up, but they'll be on later. I've just been a bit lazy, and I need to be better about that. I can't keep being lazy about it because it's like I keep pushing it off, and then it's like, oh well, you know, what's the point? And I don't want to do that because I really do like doing these things. It's just I get lazy, and I need to stop doing that. I need to get to a point where I'm like a month ahead, and I have things scheduled out. And I was like that. It just stuff must have happened. Anyway, I will see you next week. I can promise you that. At the very least, I will see you next Wednesday, and it will be diary. Bye.